For Trichomes.com, I'm Jesse Betend, and this is The High Ground. On this show, we feature leaders of the cannabis industry. We talk to everyone from farmers to CEOs and public officials, anyone making an impact on the cannabis community and beyond. California's cannabis market was projected to have 6,000 stores. In reality, there are only about 700. As you can imagine, that makes shelf space in the stores that are operating both extremely limited and extremely valuable. It might not seem like it, but an empty shelf, it's an expensive problem. Camille Roistacher is the co-founder of Voyage Distribution, a data-driven cannabis supply chain company that helps keep dispensary shelves stocked. She's also a Black female leader in an industry where founders are constantly forced to look for funding outside of traditional streams. To this day, Voyage hasn't accepted a cent from investors, and not for lack of trying. In an industry where you often have to find your own funding, people of color and women are currently severely underrepresented. So I called Camille up to talk about Voyages, both the company and her own, bootstrapping as a Black female leader in a semi-legal industry. Alrighty, so first things first, let me just say, Camille, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited.
Absolutely. First question is, might sound like an incredibly basic one, but what exactly is a data-driven cannabis supply chain company?
Oh, yeah. Thanks for asking. So Voyage Distribution, it is a data-driven cannabis supply company. And we focus on really trying to utilize all of the data at our hands to better serve our customers. And as a distributor, we are kind of right in the middle in the supply chain. So we have both manufacturers and distributors that we work with and cultivators, and we work to either process their product, package their product, and bring it to market. And then on the other side, our other customers, of course, are the retailers, all of the dispensaries and delivery services. So we're kind of right in the middle. And we noticed early on that there's this feedback loop that is kind of critical in terms of feedback and getting what the retailers are telling us back to the brands, back to the distributors, back to the cultivators even, that sometimes just falls through the cracks. So we really try to use that data to try to provide feedback all the way through the supply chain.
So a couple of questions about that, and we're going to circle back to more of this a little bit later in the interview, but without giving away like company secrets, can you give me some examples of some of the things that you've noticed, some examples of maybe data that has turned into an analysis that maybe helped those partners?
Sure. I think the easiest one to look at would be inventory levels. So sometimes the retailer isn't so transparent or clear when product is running low. So we like to keep a pulse on that, because the last thing you want is for your product to completely run out and then you don't have shelf space and you almost have to start all over. And if the brand isn't keeping up with that, if they're not making frequent check-in calls with the buyers, with the store managers, then how could they possibly know how quickly their inventory is moving and if it's sold out? We have seen accounts that have sold out and then they don't share that feedback back through the distributor, and back to the brand, of course. And then we've even had retailers upset. We had one person upset because they said, hey, you guys sold out and no one followed up with us to tell us like what's next. And we're like, oh my goodness, call us, email us, let us know. But just staying in front of that, right? So that was kind of a good lesson. Yeah.
That's a great example. Basically, like what you're saying is the most successful sort of way to be, if you're a brand, is not waiting until the product has run out, but sort of proactively being like, oh, cool, we'll send you another shipment. Like it's going well and never necessarily running out. Because of course, selling out means that you're doing well.
Exactly.
You don't want to be penalized for that. So how does that happen for on the retail side? Like, how do you end up with an empty shelf? And is it just that they're kind of going like, oh, well, let's just slot one of the other products in there? Or mismanagement? Why the lack of communication?
I think that buyers are extremely busy. So when we sit down
Mm.
with different buyers at different retailers, their phones are ringing off the hook. Like the entire meeting, they are getting phone calls, and sometimes, they have to stop the meeting because something is critical and they have to get an answer to whoever's calling. So I think it's just uh they're very, very busy, and being able to stay in touch with them, but also not bother them too much because, again, their phone is ringing, they're getting a million text messages, they can't really get through their email because it's just too much going on. So I think there's just a lot of noise, and being able to cut through the noise and just kind of be direct of like trying to figure out what is going on, how quickly is it moving, is it not moving, why is that, can we help with any sort of marketing, can we help with a social media blitz, so
Hmm.
that we can keep things moving, and of course always assuming the close. So like you said, just constantly showing them what else is next, what else is in line, so that you're always feeding them new products and not waiting for their shelves to be empty and then, oh no, wait, what happened? And then kind of catching up. So that's those are some of the lessons we've learned as a distributor for sure.
Totally, totally. So I think, listening to some of this stuff, and I don't mean this to be insulting to anybody at all, sounds sort of like table stakes for traditional industries. Now, of course, those industries have had a long time to lay the
Mhm.
groundwork and figure out what
Sure.
they're doing. So I'm sure that there's a lot of reasons that there's a need for what you guys are doing. And I want to kind of get into some of those, but just to kind of stay on the what for a second, you mentioned that you're working with both the retail companies and in some cases like delivery drivers and stuff like that. So
Mhm.
what exactly sort of are you? Is it almost like a packaging warehouse kind of facility where you are sort of housing product and people are coming to pick it up and stuff like that? That's kind of what I'm imagining.
Sure. So in California, they have micro business licenses. So it's an opportunity to basically have three licenses, three different activities in one. So our license in particular is cultivation, manufacturing, and distribution, really with the focus on manufacturing and distribution. So for the manufacturing side of Voyage Distribution, we create our own products, we create our own brands, and then we also help other brands through our brand incubation program. So helping them with marketing, helping them with their go-to-market strategy, packaging, just everything. So kind of like a white labeling arm to the business. And then the other side of the house is what we talked about, which is distribution. And distribution can mean so many things. So it could be facilitating testing because every product has to be tested before it hits the shelves, before it hits a retailer, all the way through bulk distribution. So buying and selling bulk products. So pounds of flour, pound distillate, whatever the bulk product might be, we help facilitate those transactions through our wholesale showroom in downtown LA. And then, of
Hmm.
course, the other side of distribution would be retail distribution, which most people are familiar with. So we contract with different brands, we warehouse their products in our warehouse, and then as orders are fulfilled, we fulfill those orders. So we get different POs from our clients, and then it's our responsibility to do all of the lovely paperwork that goes with that to
Hmm.
then process those orders out and deliver them to delivery companies like delivery services or retailers.
So I definitely want to ask more about all of that and kind of how you're impacted by regulation and all this change that this
Mhm.
industry is seeing right now. But let's just kind of start with you. How did we get here? What was your path into the industry?
Yeah, yeah, good question. Thanks. So, my husband and I, we actually started a boutique dispensary a couple years ago. Let's see, almost 4 years ago. And
Cool.
when we ran that, we realized very quickly that there was room for streamlining, perhaps a little bit of disruption on the distributor model. So
Hmm.
we ran into a lot of issues with distributors. And again, this was a long time ago, but just over promising, under delivering, telling us they're going to be here on Monday and they just no show. And that makes it very challenging for retailers who are trying to stock their shelves because customers are coming in and asking for different products. So that led us to start Voyage Distribution 2 years ago, and really just trying to fulfill a need of just a more modern distribution company, like using data to really help our brands grow, using data to help our cultivators understand what is selling and what isn't selling and what is the right product price per pound, and just give them that feedback. And that is what has led to our success with Voyage Distribution, because like you said, there's a lot of other industries that do distribution really well, right? They have a lot of
Mhm.
infrastructure, they have a lot of experience, and cannabis is kind of old school. It's kind of in its infancy. And even from ordering, we just noticed that things are still, we get text messages with orders. We get, just like,
Wow.
it's just so funny. But we work with all of our clients, and however they would prefer to process things, we try to match their model. But yeah, I think there's like a lot of room for technology, especially to really help this industry grow.
That is very fascinating. Just because it is like professionalizing something as simple as ordering. Like that's kind of where we're at in some cases. It sounds
Mhm.
like.
Mhm.
Yeah. This might be a layered question, but was there any specific reason that cannabis was something that you saw as a future? Why did it seem like the right opportunity? And I know that it's also meant something to your personal life. So maybe
Yeah.
how much that played in.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I actually personally sought out cannabis for migraine issues. I mean, I suffered migraines for years, and it was just so unfortunate trying to figure out what medication and what pills, and just taking a lot of different medications to try to figure it out. And then a friend said, "Why don't you try cannabis? This is what my daughter uses." And that started kind of the exploration of just different products to try to minimize the migraines that I was having each month. And that actually worked out very nicely. Over it just took time, of
Hmm.
course. It takes, you have to try different products to see what works for your personal needs. And that's what led us really into the dispensary model, because we wanted, of course, to help others. And then that helped us move into the distribution model. And we really just kind of keep evolving and adjusting with the industry as we're growing here in California.
Did what it meant for your own life in some way help to convince you to take what I assume in some ways was a risk?
Oh yeah, I think working in this industry is a big risk. There's there's so much at stake, and it's hard to even explain that
Hmm.
in 10 minutes. But
Sure.
yeah, this industry is there's a lot of challenges. The barriers to just enter the industry are very, very high, and then to survive is very challenging. There's a lot of small brands that we have seen come and go, because it's just very, very hard for anyone to kind of like turn a profit. So yeah, the stakes are really, really high. But for me, it was really trying to figure out, I did a lot of research into quite a few different industries as we were trying to figure
Hmm.
out what we wanted to do. And obviously cannabis is always going to grow. And then here in California, and then specifically in Los Angeles, these are just huge, huge markets. So if you do enough planning, play your cards right, meet enough people that you can network with, and help grow the business, it can turn into a success. But it's not an easy industry to work in, that's for sure.
Hmm. So that is very, very interesting, and this might be like a groaningly large question to follow up with, but like we can take more than 10 minutes on it. Like, please don't minimize the experience that you've been through for the sake of like a soundbite or something like that. That's kind of what I like about these podcasts, the opportunity to
Yeah.
explore a little bit. And I've talked to a number of there are shamefully few other leaders who are also Black women, but
Hmm.
they've talked to me a little bit about the like specific feeling of like risk involved with doing something that was quasi legal um,
Right.
as a person of color. And so I wonder if you have any thoughts like on the risk in general, but maybe also how that intersects with like your identity.
Yeah, I think the stats just prove that there's not a lot of women leaders in cannabis, and then
Hmm.
just the numbers are so small in terms of people of color in leadership positions as executives in the industry, which is we've been talking about this for 3 years now, and it's surprising that it's still a problem. And to me, it's actually getting worse. It's not getting better. So I
Yeah, I
would
would agree with
say,
that.
yeah, I would say when we started Voyage 2 years ago, there were more people of color running companies. And these are, sometimes legacy operators. They've been in the industry for years, right? And
Hmm.
helped kind of start this industry and did everything possible to get licensed so they could continue their businesses that they already have opened. And the taxes, the regulation, it's not easy. And it's unfortunate. Over the past 2 years, we have seen a lot of people either lose their business, close their business, or just not be able to turn a profit, so they have to turn to something else. So for me, as a woman and a woman of color, it's really important for me to be an example for others. I would say that the network in cannabis, especially women in cannabis, is really strong. I feel like
Hmm.
we work really hard to help each other in any way possible, which is great because we can't really turn to a lot of other people, so we turn to each other. And I feel like, but with the women in the industry, we're more open with what we're looking for or what the goals are or what we're trying to do with different deals, and we try to help each other, get to the next level, get to where we're trying to go. So for me, it's really just being a good example. It's growing our businesses, and back to what you said in terms of risk, it is risky, right? I mean, even just telling my
Hmm.
family what what we're doing and
Hmm.
about the different businesses, that took a lot of courage, just because I grew up in a, just a traditional Catholic family, so cannabis wasn't really, uh, you know, my parents probably weren't too fond of it. So I actually put
Sure.
together like a little pitch deck and presented our business to my parents. And at the end, it was really my dad who I was worried about. My mom, she's a little more flexible, but
Hmm.
for my dad, it was funny. At the end of the presentation, he's like, "Okay, so are you asking for an investment? Like what?" And I'm like, "No, no, no. Like, no, I'm just showing you what we're working on, how far we've gotten, and just letting you know like the journey." And luckily after that, he was very supportive. But there's just a lot of risk, and not a lot of women in this industry, not enough people of color in this industry. And I I don't know what the answer is. You know what I mean? I don't know what the
Hmm.
answer is, but I hope that we can all collectively figure it out sooner than later.
That's actually that's a wonderful story with your dad, and I appreciate you talking about that a little bit because one other thing that I've heard from some people is that when the leaders of these companies are either women of color or just women in general, there's
Mhm.
kind of a tendency to sometimes not be taken as seriously, which makes funding, which is already difficult, harder.
Right.
And actually, in a number of cases, I've either read or talked to people who have had people basically say, "I'm not going to fund your company. I don't believe that you're going to be successful, but I would buy your license from you." Um,
It's insane.
have you heard about that? Like, what are
Oh,
some of the
sure.
experiences you've had as a female leader?
Well, to add to that, when we started Voyage Distribution, I was pregnant with our first baby.
Mm,
So we talked with a couple different investors, and this was already at the time where I was showing. And investors, they almost have no shame, and
wow.
I heard a lot of discouraging comments. Would I be able to run a company and manage motherhood? Motherhood's very
Mm.
hard. How can you possibly run Voyage Distribution? And these are men telling me
I was
telling
just
me
gonna
this.
say, these are men telling you what
Yeah.
motherhood is like?
Yeah, yeah, and it
Oh
was,
my god.
yeah, and really, you almost have to like take a step back and think like, okay, how am I going to react to these comments, because it's so cringeworthy, right? And
It's
we signed,
bewilderingly
yeah,
stupid.
yeah, yeah.
And
It
you
was
have to
just
just pretend
shocking.
like, "Oh, that's an appropriate like, thank you for that
Yeah,
advice."
yeah. As we're talking about, a
Jesus
nice
Christ.
investment. This is what you're bringing up, and And I'm sitting there with my husband because he's also co-founder with
Right.
me, and they're not looking at him and saying the same things. So it's really
Yeah.
just only towards the woman because she is pregnant and she has to go through all of that. But with the support network that I had, we were able to make it happen. We have a happy, almost 2-year old, and he's thriving and doing well. And we
Hmm.
we got through it, and we signed on some big clients like right after I gave birth. I mean, it's possible. I can't sit here and say, sure, everything is easy and this is no easy, this is just like a very easy thing to do, run a company and have a baby at the same time. But I will say it is possible with a support network around you. But yeah, so I had some very
Wow.
discouraging comments when we were looking at investment, and really what happened, I just turned around and said, you know what? We don't need an investment. We are okay right now. We're signing on clients. We are profitable. Let's just get through this year and see if we can make it happen. And we did. So to this date, we have not raised money,
Wow.
and really just used those comments to just light the fire. We had another person who
Oh,
said,
that's wonderful.
yeah, we were looking at business partners and just different ventures with Voyage Distribution. One more story, and one person
Yeah, no,
said,
please.
one potential business partner at the time said, investors don't invest in people like you, they invest more in people like me. And I'm like, oh my gosh, just again, where people are just so not afraid to say race, that is racism. And
I assume this was like a white man who was saying this?
yeah, yeah,
Wow.
yeah. And so obviously we did not move forward with
Unbelievable.
that business partnership and that venture. But um and looking back, he was probably trying to say, partner with me and we can get an investment. I'm sure that's kind
Right.
of what he was trying to say in his own way, but obviously that it didn't come out in a way where we wanted to continue working with him. So
Well,
yeah,
and
so
I'm
go for it.
sorry. I did not mean to cut in there.
No, not at all. I was just
Uh,
gonna say, so we just decided no need to raise money. Let's just power through this and use our own funds and turn a profit as quickly as possible. So we made it happen.
I think that's awesome and very punk rock, and I love it.
Totally.
The I think that there's really something kind of fascinating about that because on the flip side, with social equity programs in a lot of states, there's also a benefit to having the leader of your company be a certain like
Hmm.
a certain thing, and so we have
Yeah.
to be kind of vigilant about this.
Hmm.
Who's the investor, who's profiting, and like what does it really mean? Uh,
Hmm.
do some of these regulations actually translate into equity, or are they more just kind of nice to haves? And
Yeah.
they're not statements. I think we just have a long way to go, and each state is doing its own version of this, so it's going to be a while.
Yeah.
Um, can I ask you? Last week we heard California's Cannabis Advisory Board made some suggestions for removing restrictions, and one of them specifically currently prevents vans from transporting more than $5,000 worth of product at a time. The idea
Hmm.
there to sort of prevent robberies. What will that mean for you? Is that big? Does that change things? Are you paying attention to this?
Yeah, yeah. So we've been following it to see kind of what the recommendations. Correct me if I'm wrong. I think they recommended 17 different ideas,
Yeah.
and that one was fascinating. So I think that one was for specifically delivery drivers for retailers. So
Hmm.
being able to take packaged end product to the retailer or the delivery company. Er, now that I think about it, I think it's actually delivery drivers for them. Being able to carry more than 5,000. So not the distributor side, but more on
Got it.
a delivery service. And that is for safety, because they're the ones who are like actually going to homes and apartments, meeting people to bring products directly to their door. I think that would help though, because what those delivery drivers for delivery services have to do, they have to go periodically throughout the day to go pick up more product and then
Right,
take back
right.
out to the road. So with technology and just kind of geofencing, we know a lot of really cool companies that are trying to like station cars and station
Hmm.
trucks throughout the city so that it's less back and forth. But again, if you can only have $5,000 worth of product, you're kind of limited. So I think that was helpful. When I read through a lot of the other recommendations, I kind of thought there was a lot of room for more suggestions. And I don't think I saw anything in there about taxes, and that's like the
Mm.
hardest hitting problem with California. I mean, we pay really, really high taxes, and if they could relax those a little bit, there might be some breathing room for the entire supply chain. So I just remember reading the list and thinking, I'm not seeing anything that's really outstanding for all of us. Maybe that delivery driver, upping the 5,000 limit, maybe that could help. But there are like bigger problems that I think they could try to address that I didn't see in that list. So I was like a
So
little
like,
disappointed. Yeah.
no, that's actually that's great, and I'm
Mhm.
glad you said that. A kind of impromptu question here, and this isn't at all about like us necessarily. I mean, I'm
Yeah.
including myself in the indictment here, but like the only thing that I read about that, or only article that I read about that, including one that I wrote yesterday, was
Mhm.
basically saying, "Hey, cool, like small, tiny, minuscule toe in the right direction."
Sure. Yeah.
Um, does anybody ever reach out to you for your take? Like, hey, is this helpful? Where are we at? Like, what does it
No.
need to do because I didn't hear anybody say, nah, that was kind of lame.
Yeah. Well, and that was kind of the feedback, with my team. I thought,
Yeah.
wow, and I didn't read too deep into it, but I'm hoping they had cannabis operators, like actually people running cultivation, distribution, manufacturing, retailers. I hope they had some representation. It said industry leaders, but and kind of the organizations that support us, but yeah, my first take on that was like, this isn't really helpful, not yet. I mean, I think one of the suggestions was for cafes to be able to serve food that wasn't infused, and I thought, well, I don't know, like, how does
Yeah,
that really
yeah.
help all of us? I don't know, and especially now, cafes can't even operate right in California. Like, we're
Oh
definitely
my god,
closed,
that's such
so
a good point. You're right, because everything's shut down, so it's
everything's
like,
closed.
even if
Yeah,
that
for
passes, it's not like suddenly gonna inject more business into people shouldn't
exactly.
be eating or smoking in the same
No.
place right now.
Exactly. So I just thought like that is just for the times and like what we're dealing with in 2020, like how is this helpful?
That is
Uh,
lame. That's truly lame. And that's
yeah,
why, like, we do need to do, as journalists, we need to actually do journalism and ask you guys for your take on this because, like, 2 seconds in and you're like eviscerating it.
yeah.
But that's a fascinating point because, yeah, the food and drink thing, I assumed I was like, oh, this is probably a way to get around restrictions for allowing cigarette smoking indoors in places that serve food. Like,
Mhm,
I'm sure
mhm,
that like smoking is banned and that's probably why they needed to make a special law allowing food and drink to be served in like cannabis lounges. But you're right,
mhm.
cannabis lounges aren't open like that, not in that way. So just a couple more questions here because we're coming up on the end of the time that we have scheduled. But I guess one of the things I wanted to know about is, and again, kind of old news here, but
Mhm.
how much of what you do is sort of fueled by the fact that we have these kind of like cannabis deserts in California where a city says, even though it's legal on the state level, you're banned from having a cannabis business here.
Yeah, it's very discouraging. So I read another article, I think last week, that said California projected to have 6,000 retailers licensed in the state. Do you know how many
Yeah,
we actually have? It's around 700 because of that. So
that blew my
it's
mind yesterday.
It's insane. And it's just very sad because people, the people want cannabis. Consumers want legal channels to be able to buy products that they need for whatever reason. And when 80% of the state blocks us to be able to sell to those customers because counties or cities say like, nope, not here. It to me, it just fuels the illegal industry because people will go and find the products they want. And if there's no licensed entities near them, where are they supposed to go? So it's just very disappointing. And how nice would it be to have 6,000 retailers in the state? I mean, we are a huge state, huge economy, and to only have 700 channels to be able to try to get your product on shelves in front of customers, it makes absolutely no sense for the entire supply chain. We have more than enough cultivators, we have a ton of distributors and a lot of products, and not enough shelf space, right? Because we should have 6,000 places, 6,000 retailers, and we only have 700. So, I think it's like 80% of the state has somehow blocked, whether it's delivery or an actual retail storefront. And that's a big problem for the entire supply chain.
And I was trying to like hurriedly do the math here while you're answering, but like I think that almost completely very closely correlates with about the percentage that they're off on their projection. There's something like 92% less than what they were saying. It was expected to be. Is that mostly because of these local restrictions? Is it more complicated than a short answer can be, or why are we so far off from where it should be?
Yeah, that's one part of the equation. So not having enough retailers, but it's so much more complicated than that. I mean, think about even the licensed retailers, the licensed distributors, the licensed manufacturers,
Right.
the people that have made it to be able to operate. There's so many companies out there that are licensed that are still not in use. So even though there's 700 quote unquote licensed retailers, there's probably not 700 doors to sell into. It's even less. And then if you think about actual supply chain licenses, same thing. A lot of people have a license and they're not operating. The city isn't moving on inspections. The fire department isn't coming out for final inspection. There's so many other problems that lead to operators they can't even open up their shop, right? So whether it's a distributor or anyone else. So I think it's more complicated than that. But I think that counties and cities need to relax a little bit, relax their policies, and allow cannabis operators to work in their cities because the state wants to license. I mean, the state licensing process is relatively easy compared to local licensure, right? Because the state understands that it's legal and they want to give out licenses and they want the revenue and they want the taxes, but it's the cities and the counties that are kind of holding it back. So hopefully, it looked like after this election, there were a couple more cities and counties that were open to it here in SoCal, at least. So we're hoping that turns into something and again, just allows more operators in the industry.
Yeah. Does hearing you explain it that way make that empty spot on a store shelf seem a little bit more important than when you first kind of hear that? You know what I mean? Like there's a lot more at stake in that empty store shelf.
Totally. Yeah. It's very tough to get the space in the first place. So you want to keep that space, right? And you want to work with the shops that don't charge you to have that space. So you have to stay in front of it. Once you wow a retailer, you want to continue to wow them, right? And continue to bring products so that they never question and forget about you. So yeah, the stakes are really high.
Camille Roistacher is the co-founder and CEO of both Voyage and WYLLOW. Thank you so much for talking to me, Camille.
Thank you for having me.
You can find more cannabis industry reporting at trichomes.com, as well as more great shows like this one. If you're a member of the cannabis community and you have a story you want to share with us, reach out. You can reach the show at highground@trichomes.com. Please take a second to subscribe to the podcast and write a review. It really helps others find the show. You can also join the discussion with industry insiders and get your voice heard by joining the community at trichomes.com and following us on all social media. The show is produced by David Fortin. I'm Jesse Betend, and thank you for listening.